Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have Dr. Stephen Spinelli with me. Stephen is currently the president of Babson College and has been since July of 2019. Previously, he's held roles such as Chancellor of Thomas Jefferson University, president of Philadelphia University, and the co-founder of Jiffy Lube. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
I am honored to be here and to talk with an esteemed interviewer like yourself.
You don't know that yet. Just wait.
Well,
but
your reputation precedes you, so
I appreciate
I'm
it.
anxious to test it.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So, take us back to the beginning, for those of us that don't know you as well, where you grew up, your family situation, what type of kid you were, things like that.
That's very nice of you and very interesting question. When you get to what kind of kid was I? Grew up in Springfield, Mass, which is just 90 miles west of Babson, which is interesting because I'll get back to this, but I'll get back to the youth part. But when I was deciding to get an MBA, I wanted to do an MBA part-time, and I drew a 90-mile radius around Springfield. And at that time, there was no distance learning, so you had to get to the campus. But I thought that's about as much as I could tolerate as a commute from Springfield. And Babson was 89 and a half miles away. So if it was a half mile further, I wouldn't have had Babson on my list of potential MBA. So the Springfield thing is super interesting to me. Grew up in a very Italian-American family, not unlike lots of, I would be second generation. My parents were first generation American. My grandparents came over. So very Italian community. My parents' first language was Italian. Lived in Springfield a long time. Was very lucky, got a scholarship to a private school in Lenox, Mass, which was good experience because it sort of got me out of the neighborhood, which it was actually a lovely neighborhood in a lot of ways for sort of growing up. It was a very, very blue collar or dark blue collar neighborhood. We very working class, lower middle class neighborhood. And so you weren't exposed to a lot of broader thinking. The prep school got me into this environment that was bizarre, for me, where kids had a car. I said, holy, only grown-ups have cars. How could a kid have a car? Or would fly home. You got to be kidding me! I've never been on a plane. So that was a good sort of expanding kind of opportunity. Then I got a scholarship, which was important. One, I needed a scholarship to be able to go to college. But was also important because of where I went. I went to a little college called Western Maryland College, and I got they gave me virtually a full ride. And I applied to 11 schools. I got into 10 of the 11. The only one I didn't get into was Harvard. And I've never forgiven them. I probably wouldn't have gone anyway. But it's helped me keep a competitive edge anytime we're competing against them, which I like. But Western Maryland gave me a full scholarship. So I went to whoever, all 10 of the 11 gave me some scholarship in Western Maryland. Now it's called McDaniel College, gave me a virtually full scholarship. So I was able to go to school there and I played football. The football coach at Western Maryland was a retired entrepreneur, retired at a very young age and went into coaching, but still had lots of different business interests. He then would recruit one or two kids off the team to go work for him. And did that for a number of years. I was one of the people he recruited. I went to run a nursing home in Baltimore City. Had no idea what I was doing, except I would work hard. And that's what he figured was the best education I could get. Then after 4 or 5 years, he said, we're developing a pretty good team here. Let's think about doing something big together. Let's re-enter the world of entrepreneurship in a big way and think about something. It was my first exposure to entrepreneurship as a concept. Making money, having a job, running a business, all were sort of vaguely in my head. didn't want to be poor, decided you could be poor or not poor, and not poor was better. So I'll take not poor, and that I could have some influence on that. But it was a first conceptualization of an action-oriented perspective on business. You go create the job. You go look at opportunity. And he was very, very good. He was a good coach. He was a very tough coach and a very tough entrepreneur. We used to say, if you were in a bar fight, you wanted him on your side.
Yeah.
So, he was a tough guy.
Yeah.
But he was very disciplined too. And it was the first the initial job was about discipline. And he was testing us. Go run a 300-bed nursing home. Oh, you failed, you're fired. There wasn't a lot in between. Oh, you succeeded, you're on the team. So it was a very clear sort of set of standards, which I liked. And it allowed you to set yourself apart. Just keep working really hard. Very important initial lesson and standard. Then the second, when he said, let's get together and let's do something big, he was very specific. He said, let's do something big. And so I want to start a business that at least everyone in the United States, or maybe beyond, would want to do. And he's kept bringing these criteria into focus. So it's got to be big. It's got to be at least national. It's got to have a good margin. It's got to be expansive. And he kept adding the criteria, and it was the first sort of formal lessons in opportunity recognition that I got. And I thought, this is really interesting. This isn't, I have a great idea, oh, let me go test it. I have a great idea, I better be rigorous about my understanding of market demand. And that started to say, well, this isn't just luck. You can learn this stuff. This whole thing about entrepreneurs are, fairy dust, and at birth, you get a little entrepreneurship dust sprinkled on you and you're going to go make a lot of money, that's not true. We could do this. So we stumbled on it. It's actually funny. We actually stumbled on Jiffy Lube. It wasn't, we were looking at alternative energy sources and solar energy in particular. We were out in Utah looking at this concept, and we bumped into a Jiffy Lube, and we saw this, we had no idea what it was. And we saw a bunch of cars lined up in front of this thing called a Jiffy Lube. We thought, that's kind of interesting. Curiosity is an important part of being an entrepreneur, I think. And we stopped in. The second big lesson I got here was we said to the guy, I'll never forget, why are all these cars here? And he said, to change your oil. What the hell do you think they're here for? It's pretty obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
We said, well, yeah, no, we did get that. We read the sign. We get this 10 minutes, all this stuff you'll do. That's cool. But why why so many? They're out into the street. He said, oh, it's like this every day. We said, oh, market demand. That there was a clear indication. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Ogden, Utah, but
I have not.
Well, nobody has. Yeah. There's almost no cars. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
But it ain't Boston. Yeah. There's not a lot of cars there. So, we immediately said, if they're lined up every day in Ogden, Utah, what might they do in Boston or New York or Chicago or any of the top markets? And then we got very serious about doing it in market. And remember, the code said it's got to be national in scope. So what does that mean? Let's look at the top 30 SMSA, Standard Metropolitan Statistical Areas, and let's look at the number of cars. Let's compare that to Ogden, Utah. And let's look at what the capacity utilization. And wham, we were into due diligence like crazy, and really decided that this was a big opportunity for us to have. There were 2 stores actually in Ogden, and we bought them from the current owner for not a lot of money. I thought it was a fortune. The coach put in most of the money. I borrowed money from my wife's grandfather to invest. And I was the youngest guy on the team. So I moved to Ogden, Utah, and I learned the business, and I helped design the operating plan. I literally worked in the store Saturday morning at 7:30 or Monday morning at 7:30 to Saturday night at 7:30. Every minute that store was open, and I took notes and had a dictaphone. and really thought about what this meant. And we really looked at issues of scale. And boy, I tell you, the lesson I came back with on that is, if you start a business, you're going to work pretty hard. And you can work hard for one store. You can't work any harder for 1,000 stores. It was only 24 hours a day. There's only a certain amount of worry you can contain, and you're going to fill it up. So you might as well fill it up with a big idea, with a big opportunity. So we really looked at it and we said, we think we can get it to 1,000 stores in the United States. Now, 1,000 stores in roughly it was $1 million a store. So 1,000 times $1 million, we knew how much we needed to capitalize this at. We added up, the coach had, I don't know, 5 or 10 million, and the rest of us had 37 cents. So we had to then figure out how to capitalize. And that was the next lesson in entrepreneurship I got was money follows opportunity. If you articulate the nature of the opportunity, the high potential of that opportunity as driven by market demand, and clearly can demonstrate a margin. Now, we had 2 stores, so we could really demonstrate we understood what the margin was. We said, if we can do that, capital will follow. Long story short, we got a bunch of capital and we started growing things. I then moved back to Springfield and said I wanted to become a franchisee. I wanted to own and operate stores. I had been out in Ogden. I knew what I was doing. I really believed I could change oil, man. Lube oil filter, check and fill a differential, a transmission, the brakes, battery, power steering, fill a washer fluid, vacuum cure, properly inflate the tires, all in 10 minutes at one price. And I could do it a lot. And I knew what the margins were. And I thought, boy, I could make a ton of dough if I can be the best operator in the world at the front end of this. But I also said, listen, you've learned a lot of lessons, but how well embedded are those lessons in? Boy, you don't know a whole lot. You're a young guy and you need to get an MBA. That's when I looked at all the schools within 90 miles of Springfield. And I said, Babson College had a reputation for entrepreneurship. And I said, that is who I am. It was the first time I'd actually seen a college use that word. This was, 100 years ago, but it was the first time that, and I came to Babson and I just fell in love with it. I mean, I was always a decent student, but I wanted to get an A. When I came to Babson, I wanted to get rich. So let me tell you, that'll focus your attention in the classroom. And I met some just incredible people. I wrote every paper about Jiffy Lube, oil changes, cars, retail, pricing, everything I did. And I swear to you, I loved when I got an A-. Because if I got an A, I thought, well, I got all the information. If I got an A-, I'm going to go see the professor and get some free consulting. So what do you mean this was not right? What if we priced it? And I talked to so many professors, and I swear it was the most valuable degree in the history of higher education. It really made a difference in my life. And it took me, I'm very proud of this actually, for a long time, it took me longer to get an MBA than any other Babson person in the history of the college. It took me 7.5 years to get my MBA. I didn't even, they told me, I remember getting the note that says you've completed all your degree requirements, you'll get your MBA. And I said, no, I need to take more courses. There's another course there. I know this professor. Please don't kick me out. I don't want to leave. They kicked me out. They said, you got to go. So right around that time, we had built a very large operation. We were the largest franchisee in the country. We owned the stores in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York. I love Long Island. Long Island has more cars per capita than anywhere but LA. And let me tell you, they are wonderful customers. So I love New York. And we decided that we could sell the company. We sold it to Pennzoil because they needed to secure the channel of distribution. Another lesson, there is a value cluster. And if you know who your partners are, you know how you create value for yourself, for your customer, for your supply chain. When we talk about creating value for stakeholders, understand who those stakeholders are by category and very personally who they are. It's the oil, it's the supplier, it's motor oil, it's Pennzoil, it's Jim Shaddix at Pennzoil. I mean, really know who that person is and how they define creating value. For me, it was I want to sell this with a big capital gain. I want net worth. For Pennzoil, it was I want to secure a channel of distribution so I have a long-term supply chain that I can the market will reward me for having an income stream for a very long time. Understanding that made all the difference in what the price was we were going to get for that. So we sold the company. I had just gotten my MBA. My personal economic needs were taken care of, at least at that point in life, and decided to go get a doctorate.
Before you get there, can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Yeah. So the nursing home business did you start that while you were an undergrad?
No.
Okay. All of this is after you've graduated?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that the coach owned the nursing home.
Okay.
It was one of the businesses he was in. It was in the center of Baltimore City. There were some issues going on, and he said, "I just need someone that is." Back in the day, I was very fit. I lifted weights. I could go to Baltimore City and take care of myself, and I worked hard and was tough. And he said, "I want you to get in there and learn." And so it was his nursing home.
But this is after you've graduated, or is this?
This is literally the day after I graduated.
Okay.
I graduated May 22nd. I was in the nursing home at May 23rd.
Can I ask you what, is it just from the 4 years of, him coaching you that you had this trust? I mean, this is 1977. Entrepreneurship is not what it is today,
No.
So I'm like, at that time, people wanted to find the right company, work 38 years, get the good pension, talk to me about how you were comfortable making that decision.
Yeah, that's such a good question. You are a very insightful guy. It's a really good question because going into college, I wanted to be a lawyer. I took some law classes and hated it. And I said, I can't live my life that way. And I don't want to be poor. So I got to go try to figure out how to make some money. But the coach really taught me that you create value. If you want other people to direct your life, that's a decision you're going to make. But then you got to be satisfied with that and live with that. But there is another way. And new venture creation, entrepreneurship, finding value. He used to have those talks all the time. And it was in the context of, you set a goal that is akin to what we did on the football field. You play together as a team, you have a plan, you block for someone, you carry the ball, the team scores the touchdown, the team wins, the team loses. He really taught that way. And he integrated that teaching about football into sort of life lessons. It sounds, maudlin, but he would then say, okay, if you're good, you're tough, you can go to work for me, but only if you aspire to do something more. So I don't want employees. I got to have employees. I'm not hiring you to be an employee. I'm hiring you to be a partner. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you what that means. That was the first big lessons in entrepreneurship. I'm not even sure he used that word in my mind now because I use it all the time. Those are the words, but that's what he meant. That the entrepreneur is a builder. And we're going to build a business out of these opportunities, and we're going to create wealth. And it was the first time that wealth creation became an objective for me. It was about making money. I didn't want to be poor. Man, I need a check.
Yeah.
I need to pay my bills. I like a little extra. He taught me about capital gain. He said, if you can get 5 times your money tomorrow, why would you spend it today? So let's invest the dollars. Let's talk about what investment is. Let's talk about capital gain. Let's talk about wealth. And he's the one that helped me define wealth as I can support my life in my lifestyle without working.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, and I hope I'll never stop working. He never did.
Yeah.
But you could, and let me tell you, the opportunity not to work frees you to work differently. Mm. And it made a big difference. It's the reason I'm in education. Yeah. The experience with Jim Heineman at McDaniel College and the whole experience at Babson made me want to be an educator.
Okay, so 1979, you guys are 4 partners buying.
Yeah.
Okay, talk to me. Okay, 5. Talk to me. About that. That's a large number. for a business that's, 5 different opinions on visions and things
Well,
like
no,
that and roles,
there wasn't 5 different opinions.
Okay.
There may have been 5 different opinions, but there was only one that counted.
Okay.
The coach was in charge.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and we used to have knockdown, drag out, throw it. He threw a chair at me in a meeting.
Yeah.
He was a tough guy.
Yeah.
I think he was, later on, I don't know if it was a day later or a week later, I said, coach, that was a little nuts, man. He said, Steve, if I wanted to hit you with the chair, I'd have hit you with the chair. I was just sending a message to the guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was willing and encouraged those really significant debates. Ultimately, I got to tell you, he was a tough guy and he would make a decision. But boy, we had knockdown, drag out. We used to have, I shouldn't even say this, we used to have this one thing where he would put a bottle of bourbon in the middle of the table and we would sip bourbon and we had to make a decision by the time the bottle was gone. And you could tell the magnitude of the problem was reflected in the size of the bottle that he would put. He put 10% of the bottle was left. It wasn't a big decision. Hurry up, guys.
Yeah.
It was a full bottle of bourbon. We said, this is going to be a long, tough talk. And he changed his mind a lot because of the debate. He taught me a lot about leadership. Now, I haven't thrown a chair at anybody in a long time, and I hope I won't ever do that. But he was tough, but it was interesting too. The idea was never, 2 stores or 20 stores or 200 stores. It was, we did the analysis, roughly 30 stores per market, top 30 SMSAs, 900, we rounded to 1,000. We're not successful unless we hit 1,000. So it was, you got to drive it. We are, you're in this and you're going to work 100 hours a week until we're at 1,000. So I don't care if it's a year or 10 years.
Yeah. I'm curious, becoming the largest franchisee, that's a tough task in that you're having to sell the business model to people, right? And
what franchising taught me?
Yeah.
I think we naturally went into franchising for 3 reasons, I think. One was we needed to get scale quickly. 10-minute oil change, 14 points is actually very complicated, but completely replicable. The only thing we could patent was the name. Everything else, we had people taking pictures and going through 10 times. We knew what they were doing. They're going to be competitors of ours. You couldn't stop that. So we needed to grow fast. We needed to make Jiffy Lube the predominant name. So branding was super important. So how do we do that? If you need $100 million, you got to franchise. You got to get partnership capital in. Capitalization for the high potential venture is a steep curve, and we knew we had to travel that very, very fast. The other thing was that it was a burgeoning idea, and we believed, it sounds schmaltzy, but from the football experience, that we needed a team. A team would make better decisions than an individual. And the coach made the final, he called the play, but he took 11 players on that football team. He listened to what they had to say, and then we had to execute as a team. We took that same concept in franchising. One of the things I do today is one of my other jobs, in addition to Babson, is I'm chairman of the board of Planet Fitness. Planet Fitness has 2,100 gyms across America. It's a hell of a team. Let me tell you, you listen to those franchisees and how they operate those stores, the way they innovate, the skin in the game they have. Let me tell you, an owner makes a difference. And I learned that on the football field. I learned that at Jiffy Lube, that it's not about 1 or 2 people making a decision. It's about a team thinking big. And Jiffy Lube, that 5 guys, if we had thought this is going to be a market, one small market, it will stay in Ogden, Utah, never would have worked. Make it global. There was plenty of room for all of us to grow.
Yeah. In 1987, I believe you guys went public.
Yeah. What an experience.
How does that change, the business?
Changes it a lot. And we did the same thing at Planet Fitness. I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, we took it public. Took it public at 30, and today it's in the 80s. I'm very proud to say.
Yeah.
And through COVID, a gym business and COVID, any business during COVID is tough.
Yeah.
But boy, it's a great company. It changed the business in that sort of the entrepreneurial mentality, especially back then, especially with the five of us, was we'll get in the room, put the bottle in the middle of the room, throw a chair or two, and make a decision. Now it was, a much more formal board, lots of reporting requirements, much more discipline around that. And we had some hiccups in that, I think, that really taught me well, that if you're going to take public money, there's a responsibility there that is very, very, very significant. This is a sort of a solemn promise that you're making to someone you never met, that you're going to do everything you can to get them a return. It was a big lesson for me, a big, important lesson. You take someone's money, you better be committed to bringing a return. And I learned that in the early Jiffy Lube days. And frankly, it taught us a lot of discipline. And I think that was good. And it made us expand beyond our boundaries of the five. We had to build out the team more. Pennzoil had a bigger say in what was going on. They were a big shareholder. So there was a maturing of the organization that was very, very rapid.
In terms of selling, do you have any, pieces of advice or stories on that process?
Yeah, boy. Yeah, some I can tell, some I probably shouldn't tell.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one of the stories that is really interesting is, this was really Jim, Coach Heineman taught us this, is when you start a business, think about who you'd sell it to. Or think about how it's going to be harvested. He may have said something else than harvest. Babson likes to, and I like the term harvest because I've got to plant the seed, I've got to grow it, I'm going to harvest it, everybody's going to eat better. I love that. But when the day you start it, think about how you're going to harvest it. And you think about growth in a different way. You're much more disciplined about your capital allocation. You look for high potential ventures in that. So thinking about the exit early in the process was important, and we did. We said, if we can get in the top 30 standard metropolitan statistical areas and really dominate the market share there would be a lot of supply chain that would need us. We could make the difference. Jiffy Lube could make the difference of who was number one or number two in the marketplace for motor oil. That's a power position in the value cluster. So what's the power position? What is your role in that? What is your relationship to the rest of the value? And I like calling it a value cluster because it's much more three-dimensional. It's almost never linear. What is the advertising impact? What is the real estate impact? What's the banking impact? Those aren't in a linear relationship. They're all around you. And we came early to believe that we needed to have a big relationship with a major oil company and that we would build it to a point and we would say to them, it's time to buy it. And we said to them, it's time to buy it. And they said, yes. Yeah. And it became a matter of just negotiating price.
Steve, talk to me about, your personal life, right? You're working, maybe 12 hours a day. You're doing a part-time MBA. You're obviously motivated, given your family's background and not wanting to be poor. How did you manage your personal life during this time?
That's another super good question. Sometimes you forget. I think I probably, in retrospect, romanticize it. It's probably a better question for my wife, and because I was married through this whole thing, college sweetheart marriage, still married, happy to report.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. There's a lot of good reasons to stay married, but having a great partner is one of them, including the move to Babson and all of that kind of stuff. We also had, we started a family very quickly, so we had 2 little babies and that whole thing. And I think it is, you got to marry your partner in a lot of ways, having common values and common aspirations, and having that discussion early and often. And continuing that discussion. We've been married for 43 years, so continuing that discussion for 43 years, moving back to the Boston area, taking the job as president of Babson. What does that mean? It was as much her decision as mine. And I think that's an important part of the whole, and not to be maudlin about it, but learning how to be a good partner is a ubiquitous kind of skill. You've got to apply it across all of your life, I think. And with your business partners, with your life partner, with your children, with your community. I think it's super interesting that we talk about social and economic networks now, but community has always been an important part of the human condition. And I don't know that we taught enough in business schools about what that means. And I think we're growing as business educators, as educators in general, and as entrepreneurs, to believe that we are really building communities, not just commercial enterprises, that there's all aspects of your life. And going through that, that whole experience, growing the family and all of that. I mean, one of the reasons we sold it was because we had plenty of money and it was time to be more of a dad and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's her decision. It was her decision to sell it as much as mine.
A lot of us, in the 25 to 34-year-old range are putting our careers ahead, right? And we're putting our personal life in the back burner. I'm curious, given your background of, during this time of becoming the largest franchisee, you're married and also having kids. What would you say to that person that's, I'm not even going to address my personal life. It's only career.
Now you're making a mistake. You are addressing your personal life by ignoring it. And that which gets ignored goes away. You have great risk in that. I'll be really quantitative about it. If you take a long-term view and you want to optimize the net present value of your ability to create value, you better take care of your family. You will be better at your job. You'll be happier. They'll be happier. You won't get divorced. Your kids will be happier. I can tell you there's cost to all of that if you don't pay some attention. I think I had a particularly understanding wife, but she also made some demands that, and sometimes at the time might have even rubbed me the wrong way, but too bad. So I would pay, including the exit time. She said, this is about getting there. Steve, you talk about capital gain. She's a musician. Mm-hmm. She said, okay, this is the last stanza of this music. Let's bring it home. So I think you gotta common value. When you find a partner, find one with common values, and then listen closely to how you're building wealth together. When I talk about a stakeholder having a value definition, a supplier, a banker, they're an advertiser, a partner. Your life partner has a value proposition too. Understand how they measure value, and you'll just be a happier person. I think it is a really explicit discussion you should have with your family.
You never felt like you struggled with, hey, I'm, spending, time with my kids. I could be spending time on my business or.
No, I always struggled with it.
Yeah. Okay.
No, every day.
Yeah.
And at some level, I still do.
Yeah.
Tension isn't necessarily, I make a lot of mistakes. Going one way too far. I like telling this to my wife. If you expect perfection, I'm going to disappoint you about 100% of the time. Yeah. So no, I think the struggle is good. I think you should struggle. If you're not struggling with it, you're not paying attention. So be explicit in that. So just don't ignore it. If you're explicit, you'll start to make good trade-offs, and I'm telling you, you'll be happier for
it. How did fatherhood change you?
Another really interesting question. What do you ask everyone this, or?
Yeah, it's the personal and the professional.
It's a really good question.
Grateful living is the whole person.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I think what it did was forced me to be more three-dimensional. I was, I think, two-dimensional. It was me and my wife and my business, and the two were a bit separate and driving 100% of the time. When you threw the kids in, which, at the beginning, they're crying and pooping and want food, and and you have this immediate affection. It's just, God knew what he was doing, or she knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So you have this immediate affection. You almost don't know how to handle it, but it stretches you in lots of different ways. And I found myself being emotionally stretched, sometimes painfully, but mostly positively. And I think it helped me be more understanding. I think it made me a better husband. Again, I should ask my wife that question. Maybe I will when I go home. But I think it made me a better person, to understand what was driving the level of sort of commitment. Think about this. You meet this person in a nanosecond, you're committed. Bizarre phenomenon. When you sort of from a logical perspective, makes no sense.
Yeah.
But if you embrace that, then you say, wow, that's cool. And it allows you, I think, to grow as a person. Then you start to say, well, what does commitment mean? And what does it mean in other relationships in my life? So I'm not sure I was that explicit when I was going through it. I'm sure I was not.
Yeah.
I think it helped me grow.
Yeah.
Better partner with my business partners, better member of the community, all of those kinds of things, because I was so committed to these two little individuals.
Yeah. So I cut you off, but 1992, you were about to talk about, you made the transition to do a PhD in economics at Imperial College, London. Again, talk to us about that decision, because we have this backdrop of two kids, different country,
Bizarre.
What's the thought process?
Well, it was really interesting. We sell a company that I never allowed myself to believe that I'd actually have the money until it cleared, the check cleared, and I could see it, and I looked again, and I had to verify it.
Yeah.
Whew. Oh wait, now what? And it really was, let's just take a deep breath here, because I just didn't want to be able to say, I wanted to be able to say, no, I'm not selling it because this isn't the right deal or whatever. And once you start counting the money, you've sold the company.
Yep.
So then we get it. And then so my wife and I started having long conversations. I had a lot of time, versus what I was doing before. So we had a lot of long conversations about what's the next adventure. And we would talk in terms of adventure. I think those are good romantic kinds of terms, but they're human terms too. We're going to do something really special together. So what's the next adventure that we're going to have? I said, the Babson thing, thought and action, it was so important. And I think there's a role there. I get so excited just going to a class. Imagine if I could teach a class. Wow, that would be cool. And I think I could really get into that. And she said, that's great. I want to go to Europe. I've always thought, let's live in Europe, and we could explore, and you can go to Paris. And I said, okay. We sat and we said, I'll do a PhD. We'll move to Europe. So it was her idea to go to Europe. It was my idea to do the PhD. And then it was really the Babson Entrepreneurial Research Conference, and Bill Bygrave. And I don't know if that name is still around Babson, but he was one of my professors at Babson. Absolute genius. He had a PhD in business and a PhD in physics. PhD in physics was from either Oxford or Cambridge. He'd be mad at me for not knowing the difference, but that's how smart he was.
Yeah.
And he said, if you're going to go to London, you ought to think about Imperial College, which is one of the best schools in the world. And it's very quantitative, and it's very disciplined, and you'll learn how to do research. They will beat you to death. And you're a lot of energy, and you're reasonably bright, but this kind of discipline you have never experienced. You ought to do that. And I went over and met a professor there who was still a dear friend, Sue Burley, who I think is also a genius. Carol fell in love with London. I fell in love with Imperial College. Made a lot of sense, and we moved over. It was great for the kids too. Great story about the kids is they went to a school in London, and they had to draw a map of where they were from, because a lot of kids was an international school.
Yeah.
And when I draw the map, the United States is in front of me, and then the rest of the world. Yeah. When they drew the map, the Atlantic Ocean was in front of them, and London was there. It was an interesting, cool. Different. Talking about perspective. Yeah. It changed their perspective of the world at a very young age. 6 and 8, or some such years like that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting statement about education and how to bring up your kids with a bigger view of the world. If you want to talk about diversity, you got to give them diverse experiences.
So afterwards, you come back to Babson. You move up, from a professor, faculty member, all the way to vice provost for entrepreneurship and global management by 2007. Kind of just, as you look, I mean, obviously a long period, 10 plus years, but as you look at that time period, what stands out for you and how you were able to grow that much?
Yeah, I went from actually an instructor to a tenured faculty member, and a lot of respect for the process of getting tenure and how hard it is. I mean, I was worried and I worked hard, and getting the PhD was a big deal in my life. I never saw myself doing that, so getting it was a big deal. And then I thought, God, you got to now do something with it. And getting tenure was this sort of statement that I, was putting it to produce, and it was really hard. And how hard it is to teach and do research and do the writing and do service to the college, and that sort of holistic thing. In a lot of ways was almost a fantasy. It just was so interesting and sort of a whole new life. But it really underscored the Babson thought and action thing, that you can think deeply and act decisively. And it really shaped how I thought about my role in academia. I said, I don't have to be different as a professor than I was as an entrepreneur. What are the objectives? How do I create value? What is the value definition for a student? What is a value definition for a colleague or for a parent? And if I can understand how they see value, I'm going to be a better professor. And I have this wonderful set of colleagues that I can add value to. And this whole ecosystem is, feels like a franchise. It's sort of, I'm an independent player, but I'm in the system and I'm in the division and I'm part of Babson. And I had a ball and I can't help myself. So I just kept going. And they kept promoting me, so I kept saying, yeah, let's keep doing other stuff. And we did we did a lot. It's interesting. When I was a student, and even when I was an early professor, entrepreneurship wasn't an academic division at Babson. It was part of the management division. And me, Bill Bygrave, and Jeff Timmons said, it's time for us to be an academic division, to grow into an academic division. Got a lot of pushback from a lot of people around that. Well, you can't really teach entrepreneurship, that whole silly story that now we've proven to be false. And we were one of the first colleges in America to take it to that level. So, it's another first for Babson College in that period. And we grew substantially. I remember the first time we got ranked #1 in entrepreneurship, it was a huge celebration. And, we had arrived.
Yeah.
Every time we get ranked #1 for the 27 years following that, or 25 years following that, now it's a relief. When we got ranked #1 this time, oh, thank God.
Yeah. 2007, Philadelphia University calls. Talk to us about that transition and becoming the president there.
It's a big, difficult, interesting decision. I really had to make a decision. Did I want to be a professor, or did I want to be an administrator? Did I seek which way? And I was vice provost, which meant I was sort of half one foot in each of those camps. And I said, I've been a professor and I've done that. I got to try the other. And some of it's ego, some of it's aspiration, some of it's adventure, and some of it's luck. My wife is from New Jersey, just on the other side of Philly, and her father was older and needed help. And so moving to Philadelphia, there was a personal interface. And so Carol there were a lot of schools I had talked to, and she had veto rights. Again, the part of that partnership thing.
Yeah.
Which really works. She kept me out of a lot of bad decisions. I have to tell you, the due diligence was great, and she's tough. she's the smartest person I ever met. She got 1B. It was a B plus in high school, college, and graduate school. Everything else was an A, not even an A minus.
Wow.
She got a near perfect score in her SAT. So the whole IQ thing, I was at a real disadvantage. I was always the one that had to work harder because it just came to her so easy.
Yeah.
It drives me out of my mind that she had that extra IQ.
Natural talent.
But she was supportive of going to Philly for lots of those personal and professional reasons. And it was a super interesting opportunity for me because Philadelphia University started as the Philadelphia College of Textiles and Science. It was the first textile college in the world. And it really was about professional education. Not all that different, just much more narrow than Babson was, so to speak. By the time I got there, it was Philadelphia University and had expanded to lots of professional fields: business, engineering, science, healthcare, design, big architecture school. But it was, the economics of the school were thin. So this was a very intense management position. And the board, when they hired me, were very upfront about they expected executive management at some very acute level. They were hiring an entrepreneur because they needed an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They hired me more for being an entrepreneur than being an educator, to be perfectly frank about it.
Yeah.
So go run this company, Steve, and do something important here. So we did that for a long time. We grew the enrollment, we grew the reputation, we grew the finance. We had a positive margin every year I was there. I'm very proud of that. And then, as we saw market forces, there was an opportunity to merge. And mergers in higher education mergers are hard. M&A work is hard work.
Yep.
In higher education, it's really fraught because of alumni groups and emotional attachments and all that neat kind of stuff. And going through a merger with a multi-billion-dollar health system, education plus university, was just a fascinating experience. But we created, I think, one of the country's most interesting professional universities. It's still all the same majors we have, but now we add a nursing school and a medical school to it, double the size or more than double the size. So it's 8,000 or 9,000 students, 2 campuses relatively close together, and climbing in the rankings, financially doing really well, great health system to be a part of. So there's lots of connection to industry, not only in the hospitals, but even in the venture capital, that in the technologies and the health technologies and the architecture and all of that. It is, I think, and I may be, seeing this through rose-colored glasses. So I'm just being full disclosure here. It's I think, at least an early example of an educational ecosystem and how that will expand. The whole connection to practice in a very specific way, the embedded lifelong learning that occurs. The medical profession is, I think, the best in the world at lifelong learning. It is a requirement. There's no, and we can learn from that in architecture and in business. And I learned a lot about lifelong learning through that. And I think that model of Thomas Jefferson University, I'm very proud of being its first chancellor and bringing it to this really interesting model. I'm crossing my fingers and betting on them. I think it's a great school.
Yeah. Can you speak to, obviously, when you're at Babson, there's the brand is already there. But when you're going to this new university, nobody knows who you are. Like, the people under you, creating that vision and making them believe in what you were, like saying and like changing the culture. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting, really hard, and I don't know how well I did. I can tell you how I did it in that we were, at least as a business model and as a school, we were successful. We grew, we had a positive margin and our rankings went up. I don't know if the community fully believed in it or not. I'll leave that to them to speak to. But what we really said was, what is special about this place? What makes you different? Why are you still in existence? Why, you have very thin margins. You don't have any endowment. You don't have a brand. Why are you still in existence? You must be doing something right. What's going on here? And there were two things that they were exceptional at. The first one was the built environment, and they knew design, architecture, industrial design, interior design. They were really good. And their graduates were going out and doing super special things. And they were taking, kids that might have even struggled in high school, and they lit them on fire with design. And those kids went out and did some super cool stuff. Still have some friends in the fashion business and in design that, they're just the coolest people in the world. And frankly, they made me think about entrepreneurship differently. They look at the world in much broader terms, and they say, that's a palette, baby, I'm going to paint. And that'll just open your mind to potential of opportunity. And because of that design mentality, you are necessarily have to do more transdisciplinary understanding. You have to bring things, you have to synthesize. And so they would bring color and economics, or health and architecture together as in a natural way of thinking. So you're a nurse. What's the first thing you got to do? Well, I got to go into the room and look at where are the patients and what are the patients concerned with? And they would ask questions that I'm a nurse. What's wrong with you, is my friend? They're looking at the environment around it. And they taught me so much about transdisciplinary education. What they were doing and didn't call it that was transdisciplinary education. And I always say that this is a discipline, this is interdiscipline, this is transdiscipline. And that strong fist of education, they built beautifully. So we created a College of Design, Engineering, and Commerce. They had the design was really good, engineering was tiny, but really good, and commerce was burgeoning, was a new field for them. So, design was what is desirable, engineering, what is feasible, commerce or business, what is profitable, what is valuable. So when we put them together and we said, all the stuff you're teaching, we're going to do it in a formalized curriculum. And the thing took off. And enrollment grew, contributions grew from alums, they got excited. Our students started getting hired more. Everybody was proud of this innovation, and things started going really well. And then Jefferson was interested, and here we go.
Yeah. So December of 2018, Babson, obviously is called by then, and you're president-elect. Tell us about that transition.
Yeah, strange, because I had made a decision to sort of retire, or at least retire from education and move close to where my grandchildren are. Again, my wife made that decision. Yeah. Super, I got it. So we bought a house up here a couple of miles from our grandchildren, and I was going to go, I got a lot of board work, and I was doing lots of speeches, and I could pontificate about lots of stuff, and I had fun and lots of investments. Then we connected with Babson again, and there was a bit of a time warp in there, and I had to sort of adjust my mind around what has happened to Babson over the last 11 years. Is a very different place than it was, or it was a different place. I'm not sure about very different. But if it didn't change, that would have been horrible. If you didn't do any growing for 11 years. So it was really saying, I had to go in every day and challenge my concept of what the college was, and challenge myself to let that go and say, what is and what can be, not what was. What was helps me get a little bit faster start. The history of entrepreneurship, the Jeff Timmons lessons, the Bill Bygrave lessons, the Bill Glavin, great president, the lessons he taught me. Alan Cohen, Nan Langowitz, there were a lot of, I don't want to call them old, but faculty that were here that I remember the lessons they taught me, but I learned from those lessons, but then say, what is here now? And I had to learn a lot. I can tell you frankly, the quality of the teaching was always really high. And I always felt pressure in the classroom. You better deliver. It's got to be high value. It's better. And I remember being a little stunned by that, because I would go from classroom to classroom and say, well, that was a good teacher. I got lucky. I stumbled into her classroom. She must be one of the best. And I go and I said, holy cow, they're really good. And I started thinking, man, I don't know if I could compete in this environment. These guys can teach. I just was really, really impressed by that. Then I was, that was sort of the startling, oh, wow, everybody's on the A game here. So if you're not an all-star, you're not teaching at Babson. Then the amount of sort of interdisciplinary, I'm not sure transdisciplinary, to be honest, but interdisciplinary research was profound too. And I said, they've taken the interdisciplinary research and a bigger view of research to a higher level. So there's been a lot of maturity in that, and with bigger themes. The environment was really studied well here, and the scholarship around that is pretty impressive. And I think I read 100 papers on that, and 50 of them I didn't understand, and had to go talk to the professor and say, man, this is really first-class scholarship that you're doing. And then the sort of the built environment was well kept. And it's interesting. I didn't pay attention to that when I was a professor, to be honest. And I go to Philadelphia University, and the deferred maintenance was significant. So we had to raise a lot of money. We built new buildings. We did it, but that was a big job to put in a lot of capital. And I came here and I said, wow, built environment's in pretty good shape. So we can start to think about, I had to say, we have to think about two big things. One was the graduate program. There had been a decline across the country in MBA level education, and including here, a number of students getting an MBA, and a burgeoning thinking around a bigger portfolio of master's degree programs. We developed, they were in the process of developing those programs, had done some programs. So supporting the development of a portfolio of graduate programs was important, and has yielded great results over the last 3 years, to where it's growing like crazy. Some people would argue it's growing too much. There's a big demand for the Babson brand in graduate education. So we worked hard around that. And then what was the next step in the entrepreneurship brand? We're number one, which gives you a tight chest during the next rankings period. So you better be working to be better. Good, better, best, never, never rest. And so, we focused very hard with the community around the strategic planning process and what would elevate the brand. And there was just a wonderful process. Maybe 1,000, 1,100 people from the community, it's all well documented, were involved in writing the strategic plan and elevating the brand. And that's where we got to entrepreneurial leadership as a lever on the entrepreneurial process in entrepreneurship. Makes it a much more ubiquitous application, much more human-centric around how we build entrepreneurs of all kinds. Now, all this thinking was in place before I got here. I think I added some focus around that and some specific understanding, especially about entrepreneurship. And that then, led us to discussions with our alums and some incredible support from Mr. Blank and lots of other alums, and an incredibly generous community here, and a number of faculty members who are just brilliant in leadership and brilliant in entrepreneurship. And when you put the two together, we can carve a whole new path and expand the Babson brand. Boy, there's 10 years of new research that we can do that can inform business education. I think we can revolutionize entrepreneurship education. I think we can influence business education. I think we can influence education with a human-centric empowerment of the individual to go create value in whatever role you're in. That, for me, that's really exciting. And I think Babson has embraced that. And because of the support of alums and the tenacity of great professors, and I hate naming names because I miss people, but Scott Taylor and Dana Greenberg and Jeff Shea and Donna Levin, they're already doing great work in entrepreneurial leadership. It's going to just keep going. So I'm so bullish about the future as we come out of this pandemic. what the potential for Babson is in an educational ecosystem where we are about entrepreneurial leaders. I don't care if you're a musician or an artist or a doctor. Being an entrepreneurial leader is going to leverage your influence on society and help you create value for your stakeholders. Wow, what a great role for Babson.
Yeah. You know, you talked about it there a lot. You know, there were so many different areas for a president, right? There's fundraising, there's enrollment, there's finances, there's the alumni, you know, there's the student experience, there's the professors. How do you balance all of that? Like, do you just have certain goals, like, you know, maintaining number one entrepreneurship, like increasing enrollment by this? Like, how do you balance all that?
What I try to do, I don't know that I do balance it. I think I stress out sometimes. I think I make mistakes other times. So, you know, sometimes when you talk about balancing it, it means you were right. I'm not so sure, you know, there's a lot of times that I'm bumping into a wall, and especially during COVID, where you just worry about, listen, I always worried about making money, not making money, but that's nothing like, will someone get sick or not? It's a whole different level of risk.
Yep.
Here. So it's been a unique experience.
Yep.
But I really try to get back to how connected are we to the vision and the mission and the strategy and the tactics of the college. As well developed in our strategic planning process before I got here, entrepreneurship is core to humanity. Do we still believe that as an organization? And am I supporting that? The mission is entrepreneurial thought and action to create social and economic value, and that there is no boundary between those. They are intimately woven, and we will create and educate entrepreneurial leaders. Can we look at this community? And can this community make a decision about what all of that means? And can we prioritize our actions against that rubric? You know, if we're doing that, I think we're going to make tons of mistakes. You know, do you know who Babe Ruth was?
Yeah.
You should never use sports analogies, but I can't.
I know who Babe Ruth is.
Okay, Babe Ruth said, if I was afraid to strike out, I'd never come to the plate. So, you know, I think his lifetime average was 315. That means 60% of the time he made an out, and he's one of the best baseball players in the history of the world. So, you know, we're going to make some mistakes, but if you prioritize what you're doing, then I think we have a shot at doing something really special. And listen, our applications are through the roof. The quality of our students is scary good. We have more diversity than we ever had in the history of the college. The marketplace is responding to us in a big way. The value of a Babson degree is worth more today than it was when I got mine. And that's part of my job. And maybe that ultimately is my measure. Is your life better because you were a Babson graduate? And we did okay. Now, I'll get judged over many, many years by many different people, but that's ultimately what our role is.
You know, there may be parents or students who are considering Babson, you know, as the college to go to. You know, given that we're still in the pandemic, do you want to talk about how you've handled the pandemic?
Sure. Man, I think about it every day, almost every minute of every day. It's been really bizarre. We sort of set some key guidelines, key principles early in the process. And I mean very early, within the first week. Health and safety of the community, academic continuity, and excellence. So again, if you set priorities and you have good guidelines and you have a true north, then the organization, you know, can gyrate to get there. And so everything we've done, it goes through that rubric. Then we said, you know, we think that there's going to be 3 phases to this, and there's some adjustment I'll tell you about. And you know, we're going to have to survive. We don't know what this is. You go back 2 years ago in March and COVID. You know, yep. I don't know what this really means, and we know so much more now. But we said we got to survive. We got to protect this community. We got to be healthy. We got to make sure we have the financial architecture in place, and we every single day focused on survival in that. Then we said, you know, when we survive, there's going to be a lot of stuff, and we don't know what the impact's going to be. So we have to revive. You remember, I'm a retailer, so I say things in ways I can remember. Being a retailer who's getting old, you really have to say things that way, or you forget too much. So it was survive and revive. And then if we do that right, we can thrive. So survive, revive, and thrive. I'm fairly certain we're going to survive. We're going through a rough patch now, and the infection rates are going to be very, very high. But my expectation is, not mine, the expectation of the health experts is that it will not be it is not as serious a health threat, and we'll be through it fairly quickly. And we're going through a revival. What did we learn? What from those lessons will we keep and be a part of this community? And what will we go back to or advance to? And really, I prefer the advance to. What did we learn and how do we advance? What do we embrace and what do we reject? How do we come together as a community? I've never seen a more stressful environment for as long a period of time in my life. And it reminds me of my father telling stories of World War II and the stress that people felt. And I don't mean that, I don't know if it's the same thing or not, but I remember those stories. And we've got to come together as a community. We have to believe in each other. You have to believe in this mission. You have to believe entrepreneurship is core to humanity and that we really are the best in the world. And if we do that, we've been able to, and because of the generosity of our community, because I think a good strategic plan written by, a vast majority of the members of this community, we are, I think the delta between us and the number 2 player in entrepreneurship is now bigger. And I think the world's recognition that entrepreneurship can be taught and is a competency. It's almost a required competency rather than a competitive advantage. You better be entrepreneurial, or the world's going to treat you harshly. So that means the market demand expands dramatically. Well, what do we do with that? Well, that's part of our future. It was health and safety of the community, academic continuity and excellence, survive, revive, and thrive.
Yeah. A lot of people are going to be looking at this interview who are in academia, right? And whether they're 22 and they're an assistant director of something, or they're, 30 and an associate director or whatever, or they're a dean, you've been able to move up, right? From an instructor all the way to president. What type of advice would you give to someone on, obviously Babson's probably a little, in terms of speed is obviously a lot faster than traditional, academic institutions in terms of making decisions and things like that. But, in terms of moving up in academia, do you have any pieces of advice?
Well, yeah, decide what moving up means to you, not what it means to the world. So, I've talked to a lot of professors here who are writing papers and teaching classes that are having such a dramatic impact on their students that they're moving the world up in their career. So they're in the right place. They are moving up big time. I would never have been as good a researcher. I was not as good a teacher. So my advice is to decide what moving up means to you. Don't let the world impose it on you.
Yeah. Just looking at the time, President, thank you for everything that
You're really good at this job. I got to tell you, your voice, your modulation, your questions, your respectful probing. You can cut this out of the tape if you want, but I put it in. You're really good.
I appreciate it. It means a lot. Yeah. I appreciate it. Just looking at the time, I want to be respectful, but a lot of people look up to you, right? And you have a lot of knowledge. You've lived a very successful life, whether it's professional life, personal, is there anything that's on your mind or anything that you would want to share with, someone in terms of, a piece of advice that has always kind of kept you grounded or helped you through your entire life?
Well, you've got to be careful. You ask an old president a question like that could go on for another 3 hours. I won't subject you, I won't subject you to that. But I've gotten a lot of great advice. The role of mentor and friend is, I think, an important part of what higher education is about. And one of the great parts of the Babson community is we have so many of our professors and administrators and staff who are great mentors, who know how to be friends. And I think it's a very special part of this community. So I would look at those relationships and say, honor your mentors and make them your friends.
Yeah. President Spinelli, if anybody wants to support you or your mission, what's the best way for them to do that?
I have to tell you, there are a couple of ways. And remember, I'm a college president, so if you ask me that, I'm going to say that the percentage of our alums who give makes a big difference to the health and well-being of this community. And I'm not telling you how much, send in $1 or send in $1 million, but think about making a contribution to Babson. And you can direct it scholarships or to your a research fund for your favorite professor, whatever it is. If you can support Babson with $1 or $1 million, thank you. And I love you for it. I would also ask you to engage in the life of the community and think of us as, this whole mentor and friend as mentors and friends for life, that we really are. Lifelong learning is really lifelong engagement as a community. And think about where you can be a part, how you can be a part of this community forever. I really mean that. It's one of the last, colleges are one of the last bastions of community building. The boys clubs and girls clubs the churches are, it's more difficult. Everything is harder. But campuses and communities and colleges are really this core of what we are as a society. So play in that. Don't leave that community. Stay with us.
Yeah. Well, President Spinelli, I just want to thank you for being on. I don't know if you have time to reflect, but from the son of a postal clerk to president of Babson College, that's quite the life, and to be able to do it, while continuing to value your partner, get married, have kids, value her opinion, and kind of emphasize those points to all of the young people listening here today. Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Honored. I really do mean you've got real talent, and you should keep going.
Thank you. That means a lot. Appreciate it.